I'm an FBI agent.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Say hello to my little friend. Can you dig it?
I'm very excited to bring my first guest, John Kreng. He's a dear friend, mentor, expert, writer, author, comedian, and most of all, a guy that's really going to tell us some really cool stuff about Hong Kong cinema. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me, Lawrence. I just really appreciate it. It's an honor breaking your podcast cherry.
Oh! So this isn't going to be just for stunts, and I want you to tell people about yourself, your background, and how you kind of led into where you're at right now.
Oh God, okay. I was born back east, born and raised back east in Maryland, Bethesda, Maryland. Tail end of the Vietnam War. I grew up watching Bruce Lee movies and
Nice.
and all those grindhouse films that came out during that time in the 70s. That was a really important time in my life because I got picked on all the time in school because, unfortunately, even though I was born here and I'm considered American, when you don't look like the majority, you get picked on, and
Sure.
when the country's at war with a person that looks like the enemy, you get picked on. That go home. I was like,
Sure.
how can I go home when I just live right down the street and I was born here? It's kind of.
And you like kung fu movies, so come on, guys.
Yeah. So, the thing is we didn't have enough money. My mom, my father died when I was a year old. So my mom was working all the time. I hardly ever saw her. So I was a latchkey kid. So a lot of times, I would work, take out the trash, wash the dishes, mow the lawn, and I'd get, a certain amount of money every week. So I go down I was this little kid taking a bus downtown to the black theaters, to the grindhouse theaters, and watch kung fu movies. And that was my escape. That was like, when I saw the guys that looked like me on the screen, I was like, I'm not that bad of a guy after all. I can be a hero. I'm not this downtrodden person. So that really helped me out tremendously. And it really kind of, little did I know that I would be doing this growing up, as an adult, being in the industry, doing martial arts and stunts and stuff like that. So
let me ask you something. Was there a movie that you saw that stands out where like, yeah, I want to do that?
Oh, yeah, there are a few. Enter the Dragon, I saw over 60 times in the theater.
Wow.
Yeah. And that doesn't
I guess you liked it.
Yeah, well, it played every other week, So, it was shot in widescreen Panavision.
Right.
The production was much bigger than it was with the other films that he did. Yeah. It was geared toward a Western audience, a Western taste, which is why it was so successful here than it was in Asia. It wasn't that successful in Asia is here because of certain customs, certain ideologies that were not included. So yeah, I thought it was. As a kid, I was like, oh my God, this is just awesome.
Sure.
That Snake and Eagle Shadow was another one, and Secret Rivals. Those were some of the ones that there's. You ask me tomorrow, I'll give you 10 others.
Just sort of like what, like for me, I remember seeing Enter the Dragon. Good guys wear black. Those were the movies. You're like, wow, that's badass. I want to do that type of stuff. And then now you're implementing those things. So now you get into martial arts, or what did you do next?
Every year my mom would, give me introductory lessons, and I, in between those times, I would talk to anybody who was practicing. They didn't have to be black belts. I go, dude, teach me what you got. Teach me what you're learning. So they would kind of show me a little bit. So I started just practicing on my own, and just kind of led to a certain amount of proficiency. And then I took Aikido for 3 years at the Y because it was affordable. And then finally I came to this one school where the instructor saw me at different places, and he says, look, you have good basics. I need somebody to help me teach the kids class. Is it possible you can come here a couple hours before the adult class and you won't have to pay. I was like, oh, that's exactly what I was looking for. So I stuck to the school. Unfortunately, he passed away last year.
Oh no.
Yeah. So, he was, it wasn't for him, I would not have gotten my black belt.
It's funny, and it's still you pay homage to that because you don't forget about who brought you in and gives you those opportunities and choices. And so now it led into now competing because you obviously took this to a very professional manner.
Yeah, when you grow up the way I grew up, there's a lot of angst, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration you have, you know. So you just gotta take it out in
a ring.
Yeah, there you go, in a positive way where you don't get thrown in jail for it, I mean, I got into trouble when I was a kid. We tussled and rumbled and did some crazy things, and
that's how you end up in the stunt business because we're always getting in trouble.
Yeah, but you're getting paid for it. yeah.
So then you end up competing.
Yeah,
and tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, it was fun. Yeah, it was just kind of like Wild Wild West. Every time you show up, it's a different place, different people, but the main core people you see all the time, the ones that win,
And this was in the Washington D.C. area, right?
Yeah. But I traveled all over the country.
Oh, nice.
But what I did was I saved up my money to move down to Atlanta, and one of my mentors and still a great friend to this day is Keith Vitale. He was a number one.
Yeah, I actually know who he is.
He was a number one black belt in America for 3 years, and he was in Black Belt Hall of Fame, and he was in a bunch of movies, and one of them was with Jackie Chan where he fought Wheels. It was Wheels on Meals. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, and he to this day is still a very close friend and somebody I pick up the phone. Hey Keith, I need some advice on this. He's always there.
Good.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah.
So then where did your sort of career end? And then I think you went to school.
Yeah.
Then you got in kind of in the stunts.
Well, okay. I tore my groin.
Before we get in there, when did the ponytail come? That's what I want to know.
Well, that's my girlfriend's issue here. It's okay. Well,
is it Steven Seagal era?
Yeah. Well, is that right? Yeah. Yeah, we were texting each other. I go, you ever notice he does this thing every time he confronts somebody? Is that Eastwood, glint, the squinty eye glint? Is that right? Oh yeah.
Yeah. So then you stopped competing, and then you went to school. Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I tore my groin muscle, and I was like, well, what am I going to do? Back east, they didn't. What they wanted to do was, well, let's you're going to go in there and hack up your leg and the left will be, your right will be shorter than your left, and you'll be lucky when you touch your toes. I mean, I used to be able to drop in the splits without warming up. That's how flexible I was.
Wow.
And I'm like going, no.
I can do that in my thoughts, but not in reality.
There's a psychic and a physical. I
just need to connect.
Yeah. I can astrally project into a split.
Exactly. So then you went to school. What did you go to school for?
I was a psychology major, and I became a computer science major, and I was falling asleep during classes, even though I was still acing them. Yeah. And I was like, something's wrong here. I'm not being challenged.
I think part of it is the fact that now you could screw with us mentally as well as physically.
That's another show.
So then you went to school, and then this is sort of how we lead in to stunts. And maybe this would be a good segue to go to the next part. So how did you actually get into stunts?
Okay, let me backtrack here. Okay. What happened was I had to get an elective to graduate. Okay. So guys, my counselor said, you can do anything you want except for your, anything related to your major. Because you can do anything you want. You can even learn, take drawing classes. Like, what? Drawing
classes?
Yeah. Okay. I said, drawing classes, really?
Yeah.
I go, and I said, they teach you how to draw? And he goes, yeah. It's like, what a concept. So I said, and I started asking him a bunch of questions, and within 15 minutes, I became an art major.
Wow.
Yeah. So I applied everything I learned in the martial arts into art because I had to pour all my energy into something. And I knew what I was doing with computer science and psychology. It just wasn't it wasn't working.
Yeah.
So I couldn't draw, but within 2 years, I was going to school at Parsons School of Design.
Nice.
So I was like, okay, but here's the thing. I got a very short attention span, ADD.
Yeah.
And as you move on in your class, your each year, your projects get longer and longer. So I was like, oh, this ain't working. Yeah. So what happened was when I got transferred to Parsons, one of the I think the first week or something, Billy Crystal recorded his live album at the Bottom Line, and I saw him do stand up, and I did stand up a little bit before I did that.
Okay.
And the reason it started because my art teacher, would teach class, and I would just always have some comeback, and then he would just. I would have control of the class, and
nice.
He got kind of mad, and he says, "Look, let's talk." And afterwards, he goes, "You got to do something with that." I go, "What are you talking about?"
Well, at least he was cool about it, because usually a lot of times, like, you're the class clown, and he's going to make fun of you, but he sort of took you to the side and said, "Look, you have a gift."
Yeah,
which is smart, actually.
Yeah, he's somebody I still talk to. Also, he's unfortunately he passed last year. Uh-oh. So, but his name is Charles Forsyth. He was an amazing guy. He treated us like we were his equals, like workmates instead of students.
Yeah,
and that's what I always respected about him. He says, "Look, you guys, I'm just a little further along than you are." Yeah, right. he was an amazing artist.
Sure.
So, he always, he's always been a confidant with me. Also, he's always been giving me advice and stuff. He's always been supportive. So, I feel lucky. I've got a lot of different people in my life who've always been there to kind of.
It's nice to have that diversity too, right?
Yeah.
That background and people and personalities and.
Yeah.
And then, because that, now what we're dealing with the film business, like you have the personalities of the post, production, stunts. They all have their sort of unique skill sets as well.
Yeah.
And then so after that, how did you make now that transition into stunts at that point?
So when I got into stand-up, I did it. I ended up moving to LA to become a stand-up comedian. Right. I met a chiropractor that put my leg back together without surgery. Yeah, I was in a year in therapy. It was painful.
I bet.
Yeah. So, and he told me, he goes, "Look, you're ready to go." His name was Dr. Bloomquist. He was amazing. He performed a miracle.
Sure.
By the end of a year, he says, "Look, you're ready to go back the way you were and better."
No kidding.
Yeah. And I was training. Within 2 months, I auditioned for this movie. Let me go back. At the time was I met some executives at Golden Harvest Films. Okay. They produced a lot of Jackie's and Bruce Lee's movies.
Okay.
They were interested in me doing stand-up and in Hong Kong. I was going to do half of it in Chinese and half of it in English.
Okay.
That was the deal. And I was going to go there. I was going to spend a couple months, get acclimated with the culture more. And then I was going to do it. They were going to sell it to Showtime or HBO, whatever. Okay. So the project ended up not happening. And I said, "Look, it's not going to happen. We still want to work with you. As you're a martial artist, you're this funny guy. You got some crossover potential." And I said, "All right, well, I loved your movies. I grew up watching them." And I said, "Well, what do you got planned?" He goes, "Well, we got this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or this Jet Li movie." I was like, "I'll take that Jet Li movie. What do you got? What do you got on that?" He goes, "Well, you can be a gang member, or you could do this and this." I go, "Look, I'll do it if you can teach me how you guys do your stunts, and if I can fight him, I'll do it." And they said,
"Fight Jet Li."
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, on camera. And they said, "Really?" So I told them my background and what I've done. He said, "All right, you're on." So this was in 86.
Okay.
Yeah. 86. Yeah, around 86.
Not bad for your first movie. You get to fight Jet Li on your...
Tell me about it.
Is that incredible or what?
Yeah.
That's about as good as it gets, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was... he was in his prime. This was his fourth or fifth movie.
Okay.
And he was in his prime. And it was back in the day where they made contact. So, I mean, I was already...
Which you're okay with.
Yeah, which I was okay with because I was already a trained fighter. So I was
Sure.
learning I knew how to take a hit. Now, the hard part was taking a hit and selling it for the camera and doing the fall that you're asked to do. Because, I mean, some of the times he hit me, my whole side of my body would go numb and I still had to sell the fall. And it was just it was impossible.
That's definitely the school of rock, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't have gator backs, so I had to do these flips and falls on concrete. So I had to learn how to do it right, or else I would get hurt. I'd hurt myself. So it was. I fought him for 2 days, but the thing was, before that, I'd come on set and I'd watch a stuntman and they'd show me what they were doing. So I had a little bit of prep. Whereas most of these guys, when we shot the fight, there were these guys, oh yeah, I can do it, and they came in and, it was they weren't prepared. I came in prepared. I did my homework. I came in, I talked to these guys. They showed me what to do. So I had a little bit of a ramp walking in.
Sure.
But that was because I really wanted to do it.
And I think that you're young enough, and the whole idea of like you found out how these guys do hit concrete, which is obviously a different animal, and then the fact that you have to sell it for the camera when your background was in the real deal, and camera and the real deal are two different things.
Exactly. Yeah, that was hard. That was hard to do because the thing was it was hard, yet it was you had to survive because.
Get through the day.
Yeah, and they had a different way of doing this. They would put together the fight. And they would go, all right, who can do this? You had to raise your hand if you could do it. If you felt you could do it, you did it.
I mean, hold on. Let me stop you right there. Are you telling me they would ask first, then they'd work out the choreography?
Okay, here's what happened.
That's a little bit unique.
They had a different way of doing it. Each one of us... Okay, there was a group fight. It was a gang fight. So each one of us had a stunt man that we had to follow.
Okay.
So they go, all right, you're me, I'm you, da-da-da. Okay, this is how we're going to do the fight. So we all sat there and we watched them do the fight. He goes, just watch me. So I would watch him and how he interacted with Jet. He goes, this is what you got to do. Ba, 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 boom. So I was like, okay. He goes, can you do that? And he'd take me off the side and I'd have to copy him. And within 2 minutes, we had to be ready for camera.
Nice.
So we did a dry rehearsal. If it didn't work, we had to go start over again. So we shot at least 10, 15 fights in those 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's about as high as learning curve as you can actually get. How do you feel that you did?
I felt I did all right. I wished if I'd have known better, I would have prepared a little bit better.
But how could you? I mean, this is
There's no way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Throw you into the fire pit and go for it and see who comes out of it.
Yeah. That's essentially what happened. If you couldn't get it within 5 minutes, they go, all right, no, it's done. We're doing something else. I was like, so that's how that happened. And I saw a lot of these guys fail. And I was like, dude, just get out of your head. It's not what you think it is. It looks like what it is. It might look like a fight, but it's not really a fight. It's full contact, one-step sparring, essentially what it is.
I mean, if you were to compare that to nowadays and being like more of American cinema and the union protections, I mean, this would not really... I haven't seen that too much exist. And of course, these guys come up the ranks and they take their lumps along the way. So by the time they get in there, they're somewhat good to go. Can you kind of tell the kids what it would be like, or the audience, what it would be like nowadays versus back then?
Oh gosh, I'm not saying it's easier.
Yeah,
it's just done differently. Yeah, you're given more time to prep.
Sure.
For what you need to do, I think the stunt professional is more protected, and that's great. Yeah. Because here's the difference: in America and in the West, a stunt professional has a longer career span,
absolutely,
than a Hong Kong guy.
What was the average span in Hong Kong?
About 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. And they're physically maimed pretty much by the end.
Yeah.
That's one thing that people don't really realize, that is a value that you can get here. And because of these tax incentives and going to other places, a lot of those things sort of disappear. So, I mean, I can't stress this enough. That was the school of rock.
Yeah, it was hard. I mean, I enjoyed it because it was like either you get it or you're done, you're out.
Yeah.
And I was like, going, okay,
Stakes are high.
yeah, be careful what you ask for, because this is also something I always want to do. And I had to be mentally ready. I remember I was calling Keith and about it before, and he goes, "Look, you got to be mentally ready. You cannot, say I'll teach me on set. You can't do that. I mean, you can do that here, but you can't do that there, because if you don't have it, you're done. See ya."
And now you're set up to fight Jet Li. How'd that go?
That was rough. That was rough. I mean, the guy hits he hits really hard. He hits really hard. The guy's amazing. How old
was he then? What was?
I'm not quite sure.
But you said he was in his prime. That's the thing about these guys that come over to the United States. They come here at the end of their prime for some strange reason. Actually, I shouldn't say strange reason. It's the Hollywood reason. But nevertheless, how'd you felt you did with him?
I felt I did. I mean, looking back, I felt I did okay.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of things I would have done differently. But it was such a raw experience. It was a different experience because back then, this was during the time when Hong Kong fights were. I mean, the angles never lied. You saw these guys get hit. I mean, you saw Jackie Chan get hit. You saw these guys hit the ground. I mean, of course, there's tricks that we do, but most of the time, that's why that era was very popular because the realism. Yeah, the realism. I mean, when you look at Yes, Madam, this guy takes a fall from the top of a balcony onto the floor. He hits a back and he lands on his neck. That guy. That wasn't planned that way. It was a one take, and the guy was probably laid up for a while. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, actually, this is sort of where I wanted to get into. We're actually at a good time where I want you to talk about the background of these Shaolin warriors and the Chinese opera and how this kind of led into the cinema and filmmaking of what you're talking about right now, because obviously Jackie and Jet had certain backgrounds.
Oh, okay. Jackie was essentially leased to the Chinese opera as a young kid because his parents they couldn't afford to take him to Australia. From what I was told, his father was a cook for the Australian embassy, and his mother was cleaned around the embassy, and Jackie was. They signed off for him to be at the Chinese opera, essentially. And that's, if you've never seen this movie, it's called Painted Faces. It kind of goes through what he went through during his training during the Chinese opera. It was from what Samo and Jackie told me, they said it was the movie was very romanticized. They felt like the movie Farewell to My Concubine was more accurate of the training they went through. It was very brutal.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but the brutal stories. But,
but the thing is it was brutal, but the thing is it helped them make who they are. I mean,
absolutely.
It wasn't just Jackie, Samo, Yunbu, Yunhua.
Why don't you say slowly, because the audience may not know who you're referring to, like Sammo Hung and Wu Ping. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but you're obviously speaking of the people that are sort of the kings of that part of cinema.
Yeah. It was during the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, late 70s throughout most of the 80s and part of the 90s that these guys pretty much ruled the roost in Hong Kong action cinema. Jackie Chan, of course, Sammo Hung, who was Jackie's senior at the opera school.
That I didn't actually know.
Yeah. There's this group. They had a troupe called Seven Lucky Fortunes, and they traveled. And it was Sammo, Yunbu, who was the third guy, Jackie, Yunhua, who usually plays the villain, Yunhua also was Bruce Lee's stunt double.
Nice.
And when he did the flash kick in Enter the Dragon, did the double backflip over the Shaolin monks, that was Yunhua.
No CGI here, folks, guys. This is just pure training and ass kicking.
Yeah, and I got to work with Yunhua on the Jet Li movie. That was an honor to have met him.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So, and he's an incredible actor too. He played the landlord in Kung Fu Hustle. If you haven't seen that movie,
I've seen that.
So
that's an entertaining film.
Yeah. He's a really good actor. He's a really just an animated person. But yeah. So and then there was a couple other people in that troupe also that have also gone to big things. Like Corey Yun was one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
Do you think this is also part of, like, like guys like Spiro now, how they have their own team? I mean, I usually refer to this as the Jackie Chan paradigm, the team that was set up. And it sounded like this is where it was sort of born out with Sammo Hung, and now it sort of developed. So now you got your guys that can do all these specialty skills. And now then you look at what's happening in the Furious series where they have their own specialties in each one of their skill sets. But it kind of sounds like this is sort of where it was sort of developed. I'm just thinking this out loud.
Maybe I don't want to say it was all directly because of Hong Kong. I think it also came out of necessity because each time each film tries to raise the bar from they did this, we're going to try to do this. Instead of
testosterone in the film and stunt business. When did this start happening?
I don't know. That's all kind of new to me. You're just kind of shedding new light in my eyes. What I think is because stunts kept on elevating. It became more specialized. The Matrix probably had a lot to do with it.
Sure.
But, here's the thing. If you look at the James Bond films, it started there too. Yeah. It started getting specialized. Of course, they're going to get a stunt driver to do those special stunts. And
they structured it differently over there. I mean, I've been talking to various people that do those Bond films, and even Gary himself, and it's like, you have to be that guy. Yep. That's why the credits are so long over there. It's like, well, we have a guy just jumps 50 feet, we have another guy jumps 100 feet, we have a guy that does this martial arts. We're over here, the generalized stuntman is a guy who's going to be doing high falls, kicks, and driving. So
I think or
could
I just think it's just here you gotta know a lot so you can keep working. Because the trends change.
And we can also use that word diversity in other sense too.
Exactly. So I think, as far as back to your original question about the teams, I think that came out of necessity. Because we're gypsies essentially. If you want to look at it, you gotta have a posse that kind of back you up whenever you get a gig.
Absolutely. I mean, I have my own team now, and you got the Cirque du Soleil guys, you got your fighters, you got your drivers, you got your. I mean, these guys are so talented, and how you want to make that action design. And it's just, that's sort of where I was thinking about it. And then I remember Lane telling me about what Spiro's doing and how he trained all these different guys. And that's sort of where I've been at it now. But before we get into that, or I can almost say get back to it, what about the Shaolin Warrior? How that sort of developed and got into cinema? Maybe you can kind of give us an example of how that transferred over. Because obviously there's much different fighting style with Bruce or with Jackie and what have you.
Okay, yeah, Jackie came from the Beijing Opera, and there's a bunch of people that came from during that time. It wasn't just that school. Yeah. There were other schools. There's this guy, this incredible guy. If you ever look him up, his name is Lam Ching Ying. Okay. He came from a lady who taught them. John Lone was one of the students from that school, and there was a bunch of people that came from that school. And a lot of times when they would have to do bigger shows, the troupe where Jackie came from would combine with that troupe. And these guys, they all grew up together, so they knew their chemistry, they knew their timing.
Nice.
So they ended up taking that into movies.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Now, as far as the athlete, when you're talking about guys like Jet Li, Donnie Yen, these guys, they were competitors. So they came from they came from a different pedigree. They came from a competitive background. And if you look at how they first started out, if you look at Jet Li's first 3 movies that were shot in mainland China, it was more of a demo than it was an acting piece or a dramatic piece. I mean, yeah, there was acting moments,
right,
but it was mainly a demo to show the world what wushu was.
Absolutely.
modern Chinese martial arts. So that it wasn't until he moved to Hong Kong to do the Hong Kong movies that he became more of an actor. Yeah, I mean, he's a great actor now. I mean, if you look at some of the stuff, I mean, I remember talking to him and he said, I go, Jet, you know, when we back in the day, you weren't that good of an actor, but you became a really good actor. What happened? He says, well, you know, life, you know, he was able to internalize life, and, you know, he was, you know, when you work with actors, you tend to learn off of that, and that's how he kind of learned.
The one thing that always stands out for me, obviously, I love Fearless, but the one that stood out for me before Fearless came out was Unleashed.
Oh yeah.
You know, his range there on his acting was like, well, wait a second.
Yeah.
You know, this guy can actually act.
Yes. Yeah.
And of course, his career went a certain way after that. But anyways, it just validates he kept at it for so many years, and now his acting skill kind of developed. And that's kind of an interesting thing too, because this is something I've been talking to my stunt buddies about. And so you got the stunt guys that work their way to be an action star, and then you got actors who become an action star. So you get the Tom Cruises and the Jason Stathams who came from the acting route versus the Tony Jaa's and the Jackie Chan's and Jet Li who end up becoming a star that way. So if some bad guys are chasing, you know, Jet Li or Tony Jaa, they just turn around and kick some ass. Whereas in the other fellas, they get into the point where they use their acting skills. But I remember talking to my stunt guy and say, look, I need you to run. I need you to run like Statham or Tom does, because these guys really commit when they run. And it doesn't seem like it's action, but it's selling the story.
Yeah. So
it's funny how these guys just broaden out, but did they come from that angle or did they come to that angle?
Well, you know, if you look at it this way, it's not, if you look at it, okay, let's look at it this way. There's a circle. Imagine a circle. And then there's the center point, you know, the center of that circle. That's where you want to go. It doesn't matter where you start.
Is this the time I need to have a segue with Steven Seagal? Is that right? It's all about the circle.
It's about the circle. That's what it's like.
Anyway, no, continue.
Yeah.
I guess we all have like different philosophies, but from my being behind the camera, to me, every little nuance tells me a story.
Yeah.
If I see, like, again, I use Statham and Tom when they run, they have the commitment on the face. We've talked about this in fighting as well, like with Tony Jaa versus, there was 2 other fellows that you liked their stuff because they do show the emotional content. One, I think, was Victor Yu. There was 2 other guys. I mentioned Tony Jaa. We had this conversation 2-3 years ago, so it may not be fresh. But you were saying, guys, you know, when they take the hit, their facial responses react as opposed to having no reaction.
Yeah, you gotta. If you don't show any reaction, you're essentially screwed. The audience isn't gonna feel it. They're not gonna be behind you. You know, you gotta. The thing is no matter where you come from, whether you're from the acting into the action or the action stunt world into the acting, you've got to meet in that middle ground. You gotta emote, and if you don't, you're not doing your job.
That's a perfect point to transition to what we were talking about 2 weeks ago. John and I met up, and I think we were into it for about 2 hours, and I realized I had to get going. I just realized that we were just starting to get going into it. But the one thing that kind of stood out for me is that you were telling me how Wu Ping's father and how this all kind of started developing in the 50s and then 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. Now we look at Wu Ping now ready to do Crouching Tiger #2 and how this has evolved. So maybe there's a way if you can transition that based on Wu Ping's father to where we're at right now.
Oh gosh.
I know that's a long runway, but if you were to describe what it looks like in the 50s versus 60s, and then what you're telling me in the heydays, 70s and 80s, or early 90s, when they were still taking the hits.
Okay, what happened in the 50s was there was these movies called the Wang Fei Hung movies. He was like a Chinese patriot. He was like a George Washington, a Paul Revere. He was the actual person that lived, and Jet Li ended up portraying him in 4 or 5 of those movies called Once Upon a Time in China. And now they're doing a remake of it again. I haven't seen it yet, but there was this guy back in the 50s. His name was Quan Tak King. He was a actor who portrayed this guy, Wang Fei Hung. He embodied this guy. They did over 100 movies. I think it was 100 movies. I can't remember. I can't. Okay, they don't quote me on this, but they did a lot. A lot of movies. A lot of movies. So, these movies were like serials. They came out like once every 2-3 months. They were, black and white movies. And Wu Ping's dad was one of the bad guys. And then Shek Keen was another bad guy. He was the guy who played Han in Enter the Dragon. And the fight choreographers were, there's this guy, Lau Kar Long, whose father was one of the fight choreographers, along with Wu Ping's dad, who was also one of the characters. So they would bring their kids in to be in the background. So that's how they learned this whole, the how to make this work for film. But the thing is back then it looked like a demo you would see at a martial arts school. There was the impact wasn't as strong as it is now. I mean, if you look at those films now, you kind of go, oh, okay, that's kind of sloppy. That's kind of, I mean, no disrespect to these men at all. I mean, they're still my heroes growing up.
It was at its inception. I remember when a couple of years ago we were, I was up at some Asian film festival up in San Francisco, and one of them films were like in the mid 60s with Pepe. And I remember you saying something along the lines, this is before things when Bruce raised the bar again at that point. And this is, again, you're still talking about the 1950s.
Yeah, so. Yeah, Bruce Lee definitely raised the bar. He raised the bar tremendously. He made people kind of think about what was going on with their stuff. I mean, there was these long, drawn-out fights that, were like, why are you guys doing it like that, But the thing was then if you look at the influence of Hong Kong cinema, they're always reaching, like in the 60s with the swordplay films, they pretty much copied what you saw with the Japanese samurai films. Like the One-Armed Swordsman and the sentimental swordsman. It was always these quick strokes, they would copy Toshiro Mifune's moves. And, not moves. When I say moves, I'm talking about essence. I'm talking about attitude. I mean, Toshiro Mifune was an incredible actor. Not only was he a great action, he did great action. He also was a great actor. Right. He did movies where they had no action. That's a sign of a damn good actor in my book. So, I mean, and he was able to create emotion, even when there was no dialogue. His body language. I mean, if you look at Seven Samurai, that's a film school in itself. You can watch it every frame and learn something new. Even to this day, when I watch Seven Samurai, I look at it like, man, Kurosawa, what he did. Why? Oh, that was just so perfect. What he did.
Well, I think it was even more amazing. As you know, I've been around a lot more of the Asian community in the last year and a half, and it's like, it's also a culture that doesn't always show their emotions as well. So it's a unique experience where as a culture they don't show it, but now you have to convey it on the screen and we have to be able to get it.
Yeah. Here's the thing is this. It's a good point you brought this up. There's a certain amount of, like, if you look at how Jet Li does this stuff, conveys an emotion, it's not over the top like Jackie or Bruce. It's very reserved and it's very subtle.
Are we ready for some sound effects? Like,
like an ending pose that Jet would do if he's trying to stay in control of his composure. But you can kind of see the inner workings of him trying to keep that composure.
But that's a really good point, because the way I see that, the way that you're conveying that to me, that's part of the story as well.
Yeah. But it's also part of the culture.
Yeah.
It's very much a part of the culture. I mean, the patriarch of the family, when the kids lose control, they do some crazy things. He has to keep his crap together and be the example, but you see the inner crumblings, it's all that stuff. I mean, and that's transferred into action. It's the Confucianist, ideology of an Asian family.
Sure.
It's very multi-layered, should I say?
Yeah, I mean, I want to let the audience know that I'd mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that John is an author, and he's actually written this book on fight choreography. And really, this thing is an amazing reference. I don't know if we can call it an encyclopedia or a Bible. I think you were saying, or somebody said, that Tom Cruise refers to this book, but there's so much information in this book that we're just touching the surface here. Because some of the things that John is touching on is in great detail in his book. I mean, how many pages are we at here, John? Close to 500?
Yeah, but the thing is it's kind of cheating. It's a little bit more than that, because the introduction is like 70 pages. So
yeah, I mean, folks, we're touching on maybe 3 or 4 pages in this book. So if you want to, find out this amazing book, I love the way it's written. He always has a summary at the end, and it's like, folks, you will get schooled. It's great about all these cool action shit you see on TV, but if you want to have the background and have the tools and the insight of what's going on, this book, Fight Choreography and the Art of Nonverbal Dialogue by John, is an amazing resource.
Oh, thanks.
It really is, John. I mean, I remember Elaine and then other people have actually referred to this, and it's certainly going to be the Bible, I think.
Thanks. Nice. It's an interesting book. Thing is I got overzealous when I wrote this book. I wanted this to be, in my mind, I wanted it to be Terminator 2.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is, when that movie first came out, everybody was like, "Oh my God, how am I gonna follow this as a filmmaker? How am I gonna top this?" That was what my mind was, because I looked at some of the stuff was out there, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna take this to another level. So
I think you did. I think this is your Terminator 2. I mean, this is so well written. Now, obviously, when I first looked at this, I'd already been on stunts for probably a couple of years, so I had a lot more insight in this, and I was involved with martial arts when I was younger. And from a cinema perspective, I learned something here too. So I think you're being kind of hard on yourself. I'm sure, like anybody else, can make another masterpiece once they've done it. But I mean, I don't want to take away from anything that you've done here, John, because it's an amazing resource. And anybody that says otherwise, I mean, look at Tom Cruise's career. I think it's been kind of holding off for him. And so,
yeah, that was nice. That was a nice
gesture.
Yeah. I never met him, and I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah. Well, the proof is in the pudding, and so, anyways, to get back, and I only mentioned the book because we're getting into the 50s, 60s, and 70s where Bruce is, and of course you go into great detail in the book, but why don't you tell us about the 70s, because that seemed to be the heyday of martial arts, not necessarily cinema, but martial arts. That's when everything took off because the movies were coming out, and that's sort of when I got into martial arts when I was a little kid.
Well, if you look at the history of what happened during that time, the Western was dying, the war film was done.
Was the cigar side of the mouth where the guy threw the whole movie?
It's just the private. It was always a private eye that was smarter than the cop. And then if you look at it, that's
had a cool comeback.
Yeah, and then it was Dirty Harry that changed everything. James Bond started changing things, and then the martial arts started getting more popular. At that point, if you look at it, it was still up to that point. It was an exotic way of killing somebody. That's how the West saw martial arts. You saw that judo chop, odd job. It was
I like that.
That's what it was. That's what it was. There was nothing beyond that.
Wow.
It was just, this is a cool way of killing somebody. I mean, to this day, I still deal with filmmakers that have that mentality. But I try to give them a little bit more. I go, let's take this a couple steps forward. Let's give this character a little bit more depth of why he's doing this and the moves behind it. So instead of going back to that stereotype, and because of the 70s, I think Bruce changed a lot because, and the TV series Kung Fu, there was it introduced a philosophy of the martial arts. There was a lot more emotional and spiritual depth behind what the moves were about. So that really changed things. And also, if you look at the action adventure genre, that was the birth of the action adventure genre at that time with the set pieces, and all the stuff. I mean, James Bond had a huge contribution to it. I mean, they if you look at I think it was Goldfinger was the first one that had the action set pieces. This is the weapon, this is the car, this is the stuff, and then this is how it
was being set.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of people don't see that. They felt it started later. I was like, no, it started there.
Yeah.
You really look at it started with the Bond films.
I know. I remember Vic Armstrong talking about it in his book and talking about these guys that were good for the fight coordinate.
Bob Simmons.
Bob Simmons, right?
Bob Simmons, yeah. I mean, you look at some of the stuff he did.
Even his brother says the same thing.
Oh, he's awesome. I mean, Bob Simmons, I study his stuff to this day. Yeah, I watch his fights, I go, man, it still stands.
No, exactly. So now we get into the 80s, and then if you look at it from formula TV here in Hollywood, it was about go big, go home. It was more explosions, more cars wrecking. It's like a different era. What do you think happened in Hong Kong cinema, or how did that influence in the 80s?
And okay, if you compare those, what happened was they could not compete with the explosions and the car crashes and all that stuff. If you look at Hong Kong cinema at the time, there's very few films that had a car chase that could top The French Connection or Bullet or any of those films, because Cars has a different type of representation in Hong Kong than it does here. I mean, it's all about the muscle and this over there. It's just getting from one place to the other. And in Hong Kong, it's like going to New York. You're not going to have a car chase in the middle of Hong Kong. So they have a completely different mentality about it. It's a commuter society.
Yeah.
So and you don't need a car. I mean, if you had a car, that meant you had money.
Sure.
So, but most people took cabs and took the bus or whatever, So, I mean, I'm saying in general, but yeah, that's kind of what it was about. So what they had to do is the only thing they can do was compete against the West was the fight scenes, because they had this wealth. They had this wealth of understanding. They had this wealth of skill and talent that made us go, what? I mean, if you look at when Jackie came to America to do the Big Brawl, that was a very good example.
Deal.
Yeah. Now the issue was, if you compare that movie, Jackie's timings and his moves, compared to his Hong Kong films at that time, it was very slow. Because at the time they hired professional wrestlers because they thought, well, these guys can fight with Jackie because they know how to fight.
Sure.
for theatrics.
Again, it sounds like we're still dealing with realism because they didn't have the budget and monies to do the car crash. I mean, these are all great and interesting points that you're making. This is good stuff.
Thanks. Yeah, but the thing is, if you look at Big Brawl, the reaction speed wasn't fast enough, because he was using smaller guys that were more agile instead of these big, bulky wrestlers.
Yeah.
I'm not taking anything away from these guys that worked on it. It was just a sign of the times and a sign of the, they weren't ready for that type of action. This
is actually, folks, who's ever listening right now, this is true insight, because this is when we start getting to the idea of manipulating frame rates.
Yeah.
You got these big guys that can't move as quick as the smaller guys. I mean, I don't know if you saw the fight with Pacquiao and Mayweather. I mean, I remember back in the day watching these guys do 15 rounds. These guys were just going all out, but now it's more technical.
Yeah.
You bring that to films. How do we keep up with the speed? It's sort of like what happened with Tony Jaa and Paul Walker's stunt double. I mean, Tony Jaa's speed is like.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, he's probably one of the true action heroes that are actually out there right now.
Right.
So it's just kind of funny, like 30, 40 years later now, where we're at with that. But that's an interesting point you're making.
Well, I think if you look at, first off, Paul Walker's not on that level on a physical scale. I mean, but the thing is, he brings something different to that. It's, if we make a correlation of, say, professional wrestling, there's some wrestlers that are very charismatic that can fill up seats.
A lot of seats.
Yeah, that are very charismatic. That can do a few moves here and there, but they're not technically advanced or but that's nothing taken away from Paul Walker too.
No, but it's just saying, like, the trained eye, that's what you've developed now, is that you can see all these different errors in the speed, because now if it's not a car driving out or big explosions, that's what this generation is being used to because of CGI, but we didn't grow up with that.
Yeah, no, but it's
a delicate area. I understand.
Yeah, but in Hong Kong, they do lower the frame rate. There's a reason why they do that, because not everybody can move at the same speed at the same time, and it causes a lot of dead space. Yeah. So in order to speed that up, you advance the frame rate. So that kind of creates that kinetic energy. Yeah,
it does. And I think that in American cinema, too, I think a lot of way that they're kind of getting around that is just putting insert shots with that dead space. Or, I guess they can kind of get into the fight choreography as well. But, all right, so let's look at the 90s now, when these things now, CGI is starting to come into play. What do you see Hong Kong cinema in the 90s?
That was a transition period for them because at one point in time, there were about 35 movies that came out every week.
Jesus.
Yeah. They were the second highest distributor was India. Then it became Hong Kong. Then the U.S. As far as releasing films. Right. Then the recession came in 97. I think it started in Malaysia or Japan, and it kind of swept through, and it just decimated all of Asia. It was a recession that just killed everybody financially. And so at that time, you saw a lot of these low budget films that had this real creative ingenuitive spark. They were just like, okay, let's try something different. Throw it up a wall, see if it sticks.
Yeah.
Some were good, some weren't. Some were very forgettable. Some, so it was what it was. But the thing is there was a uniqueness about it, about that era, about the 80s and 90s, where they thought, well, let's just go balls to the wall and see what happens. But in 97, things came to a halt with the economic recession in Asia. What happened was investors thought about it and they said, you know what? Instead of me just tossing a little money here and hoping this movie does well, why don't we all just pool our money together and make something bigger? So that's when you started seeing bigger productions, better production value, and less risk-taking, creative risk-taking. You saw a lot of. they still make great fights. Hero was amazing. If you saw that with Jelly and Diana.
Oh my God, it's one of my favorite films, and it's just there's something about that. And it's funny that we got into this because you talked about this aesthetics of it and about this whole idea of the calligraphy. This is something that's not in American movies. About the aesthetics of the hand gestures. It's very sound. And I think when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, you were saying about the movies in the 50s and how it had a lot to do with the culture, and they keep remaking these movies, but we're here in the States, it's a different animal. So it almost kind of sounds like Crouching Tiger, Matrix, Hero, all of a sudden things kind of changed and they came into their own, and it was exciting filmmaking. And, look at how much Wu Ping influenced that movie.
Oh God, yeah. The first Matrix was amazing. I mean, while I was there watching him and do all that stuff, it was great. What happened was the Wachowskis are smart enough to hire Yuen Woo-ping to be the fight director on it and kind of call the shots on where the camera needed to go.
Let's take a step right there, because people may not know that the fight choreographer and fight director almost has equal billing to the director. And that's something that American audience are not really aware of. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about fight choreographer, fight director? Okay,
in Asia, specifically more Hong Kong and Chinese filmmaking, the fight director is as important as a director. There are times where you'll see a new director make a movie and have a well-known fight director come in to take, to help bring this new director over, to get people to come in and see his work. A fight director in Hong Kong has complete control over the set, over where it puts a camera, where the lights are, what the actors are going to do. They even go into the editing room and tell the editor where to cut.
And this is kind of an amazing thing, because this is something that's not really acknowledged here in North America. And if you ask, I don't know how many stunt coordinators, how many times they're happy with the work, because what they envisioned, what they choreographed, and what was the final edit are two different things.
Yeah.
And then you can look at what happened with John Woo having his action director or fight coordinator and then coming over to the States, and then that element is missing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, those movies are iconic.
Yeah.
And then he comes over here and, well, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. The kinetic energy is completely different. It's not, I wouldn't say it's gone. It's just different. Unfortunately, here's the thing. It's the structure. The structure, the hierarchy structure is different. And, for one person
in terms of how it's done over here in the States.
Yeah. And the thing is, for a action director to come here, you're going to have issues when you bring somebody over. You got to know how to handle them. Because
issues here in Hollywood, politics that exists?
Never.
Come on.
Yeah, it's all about when
did this start happening?
It's all one happy family.
Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yes. Is that right? Is that right? That should be the name of this show.
Yeah.
Is that right?
We should actually have some segues of Seagal coming in there and with his voice and is that right?
Yeah, listen here. You don't want me coming over. Oh, yeah? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, politics is a big deal, and we kind of have an idea what happened with Wu when he came over here, and it's kind of funny. I remember seeing 4 or 5 years ago, he had this, I can't find it anymore on YouTube, but he was doing that movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme in New Orleans.
Hard Target.
Yeah. And he had all this behind-the-scenes stuff, and I'm like, this guy was on another level.
Yeah.
What he was doing, and it's because now I experiment with my guys, but it was obviously, it's good to hear that, or good to see that other people were doing and taking things some serious risk, but well, there's a reason why John isn't over here anymore.
Yeah, well, if you look at it this way, films here in the West have become a safe thrill ride.
What an oxymoron!
It is.
A safe roller coaster ride.
Yeah, that's what it is. And when you, I mean, and
you're on a roller coaster, but wear your seatbelt, your helmet, and
yeah. And then when you walk out of the theater, what did I just do? What did I just experience? I mean, if you look at you ever see Bullet in the Head, the John Woo movie? Yeah. I mean, that's talking about a personal story and a risk. You're like, oh my God. You walk away the theater. My knees were shaking the first time I saw it in the theater. I was like,
wow.
Oh my God. That was amazing. Same thing. I felt the same thing with Once Were Warriors. You ever see that?
Oh my God. I put that on my list. I love that movie. And
yeah.
You're talking about the Kiwi movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that fight sequence, and I had to do this.
Yeah. I was shaken up. I mean, I watched this and I was like, oh my God, it was an emotionally true those two scenes, the scene with the husband and wife when she was
that scene, yeah.
That scene. Oh my God, I was like, holy crap!
Can you get any more realer than that?
Yeah, and also the thing is, would that happen here in America?
No
I
way.
seriously doubt it. And the same thing when the father. I don't want to spoil anything, but when the father did what he had to do in the bar.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh man! I saw that at the DGA, and Rena Owen did a talk afterwards, and I walked out of there. My knees were shaking. Everybody was the same way. Like,
it's an unforgettable movie,
Yeah.
and I mean, goes again. What fights can do to an overall product or the action design.
yeah,
I mean, just with Crouching Tiger and Matrix, and then with the bullet sequences, everything was very unique. The frame rates, everything that encompassed that movie, you could not forget. And again, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, when I saw it, of course, I've been always like a fan of like Hero. That is my movie, just based on the cinematography aspect, the aesthetics, the story, how it ends, like the way it just ends with Jet Li's face. I mean, every part of it is just this thing that just stands out for me.
Yeah, and for me, the composition and the use of colors for every scene was amazing. Coming from an art background, I was like, oh my God, how using these color palettes for to use as an emotion was amazing. I was like, you can't do that today here.
It's funny because I've talked to some people about this in the past who were raised in the Asian market, Malaysia, China, and I just get the idea that they're just so much more advanced. I mean, you get the idea. You have the Europeans, you have the North Americans. They all have a different vibe and flavor, but it seemed like it's a risk, but it's not. It's a developed skill set on those colors.
True. I mean, well, you got to remember, cinema is no longer okay. Mainstream cinema, I'd say, with the studios, you're gonna get the whiz bang. You're gonna walk away going, okay, that was cool. But the thing is, you're not gonna be emotionally satisfied. I think the only way you're gonna be emotionally satisfied with any type of action film right now at this moment is if you have a director that understands action and maybe not have that much studio interference, has that type of power and control,
There's a certain stunt coordinator here in town, and I found through the grapevine he just doesn't get in over movies over $50 million because they just leave him alone.
Yeah.
You get over the $56 million and it's, what about this? What about that? What about this? And
right.
No, then you can have more creative influences. Yeah,
that's a great way of looking at it. I mean, you gotta be happy with what you do, and sometimes if you wanna have that big best grossing film of all time, you got to pay a price for it sometimes.
Yeah, as you know, I know some big time people, and I get the feedback on the directors and how they deal with the producers, and that's a whole nother set of politics as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
But I think this is probably a good point to end off for part one, and when we come back for part two, we're going to get into the process, your process in terms of fight choreography, and maybe you can give me some insights. And
I have none.
Oh, okay. No, this.
What do you want? You want to kick here? All right, let's do it.
Yeah, let's keep it simple here.
That's what this book is about. Page one, kick here, insert kick here.
But bro, man, like where does the high flying 17 kicks in one move kind of come into play here? Yeah, no, we're going to talk about the process now, and hopefully you've got an insight in the history, because it's just a wealth of knowledge of what John brings to the table. And then we'll talk now for part two for the next segment on the process. Stay tuned.
You digger!